Richard Prosser.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I'm pleased to rise to take a fairly brief call excuse me, in this second reading of the Reserves and Other Lands Disposal Bill. It's quite a long time, Mr Speaker, since the first reading of this bill, 6 years in fact. New Zealand First will support this bill to the Committee of the Whole House, Mr Speaker, but only because it's at that stage that we intend to recommend that the bill be returned to the Select Committee for reconsideration. Either that or it be thrown out, Mr Speaker, because it's difficult to envisage how anything that is contained in it can be so desperately urgent as to warrant the expenditure of further time of the House when it has languished for so long on the back burners of government priority, irrespective of what other members have said about it being non-controversial and the fact that some matters take 5 and 6 years to come back to the House, Mr Speaker. Life goes on. And it's not. We don't seek a return to the committee because I myself, as a member of the present incarnation of the committee, have any particular desire to undertake a rather soporific delving into the technical detail of a somewhat elderly omnibus bill. Rather, it is that in 6 years which have passed between the first reading and this now second reading, in this vitally important piece of legislation, a number of other enactments it would appear, superseded or otherwise overridden parts of the bill as it stands, as other members have made mention of. Looking back at the Hansard, Mr Speaker, from 5th of March 2009, when this bill received its first reading and was sent to the Primary Production Committee, is a bit like looking back in time. And the list of names of honourable members who've now long since departed these halls for what we can only hope are better and greener pastures for them, is testament to the present relevancy or otherwise of the bill, Mr Speaker. Shane O'Dern, the chairperson, with whom I had the pleasure of serving as an observing member on the Primary Production Committee in the last term of Parliament. The Honourable Jim Anderton, a name known to everybody. Brendan Burns, the Honourable John Carter, a predecessor of yourself in the chair, Mr Speaker. Dr Ashraf Chowdhury, Sandra Gowdy, the Honourable George Hawkins, Colin King, who was previously my Member of Parliament, replaced by Stuart Smith, a current member of the committee, also my current Member of Parliament because I live in the Kaikoura electorate. Not for long, however. I'm about to cross the border of the Ashley River and actually become a resident in the Waimakariri electorate. So Mr Matt Ducey, who is my colleague, will become my new Member of Parliament. And Sue Bradford, and all very fine members, Mr Speaker, and I have no doubt that their individual and collective contributions to this bill were of great merit. And perhaps the one surviving member of the Select Committee, the Honourable Damien O'Connor, may be in a better position to comment on the relative merits of the contributions, Mr Speaker. New Zealand First has no institutional memory of this bill, Mr Speaker, because just as Mr McKelvey remarked, it was a bill that came about before he was in Parliament. In actual fact, this bill came through in the 49th Parliament when New Zealand First was on sabbatical, as it were. And I have to say that it's now generally accepted, of course, that the Parliament was the poorer for our absence, and the House, as the nation, rejoices in our triumphant and glorious long overdue return. But I digress somewhat, Mr Speaker. Yes. I will come back to the bill. I apologise for that. I preempted your wise judgment, Mr Speaker. The bill itself deals with a number of issues, 17 in total are listed, with some 58 clauses pertaining to them. And a number of those, as the Minister alluded to, have, by the passage of time, been addressed or at least altered by other separate legislation in the interim. Some matters, it would seem, couldn't wait long enough for this bill to work its way up the priority ladder, up the popularity ladder, and come back to the front of the House of the Order paper. As an example, and this has been mentioned before, Mr Speaker, Lookout Point in the Waitaki was dealt with in 2013 in the form of a private member's bill in the name of Jackie Dean. A splendid bill it was. I'm sure I voted for it. The Auckland Volcanic Cones land, which is now under a completely different and separate piece of legislation, has different legal ownership, different status, different management, under a deal that was settled with iwi in 2012. And any number of pieces of road on the West Coast, which my colleague from the Greens made mention of, to which this bill pertains, very probably now made largely irrelevant because of one of the more onerous clauses in the West Coast Windblown Timber Act, which was kind of bulldozed through this House in the face of all reasonable questioning just last year, which made changes to the ways, in fact, which roads can be created on the West Coast under the ordinances of that bill. Mr McKelvey also made mention of road reserves and the boundaries of those road reserves and the issues which local councils have to deal with when things occur in the past where boundaries are perhaps not given the due regard that they would be given today, where things just happened and although there was a road reserve on paper, rights of way were established across it. When problems cropped up, the councils had to go back and revisit those particular issues. The boundaries had to be redrawn. There were land swaps, and of course, these types of titles that are placed in reserve and in road reserve are altered by councils from time to time anyway, under due process and in consultation with the people who elect those councils. And I, in actual fact, have been dealing with one such issue in my local. Rohi, I will call it, Mr Speaker, because I can't call it my electorate. Obviously, I'm not the electorate MP, but in the area that in which I'm based, one such issue happening at this very time, where there's a controversy between some residents in a particular area and some other residents as to the nature and status of an old formed legal road reserve, which is now subject to some altered use. And it's a bit of a headache for the council, but one which hopefully they will resolve to everybody's satisfaction. Dr Richard Worth, Mr Speaker, back in 2009 remarked, and I quote, "This legislation deals with some very iconic areas of New Zealand. And I'm sure that not too many pieces of legislation can lay claim to resolving issues with 3 of our national parks, Kahurangi, Paparoa and Westland, one of the most iconic features of Dunedin City, the Octagon, all of the volcanic cones dotted around Auckland City, and an offshore island marine sanctuary. The benefits of this legislation are considerable. There will be real benefits for people throughout the country, from the community in Port Chalmers, whose residents will see the local bowling club's lease formalised, to the Targa Area Club, which will have its future secured, and to the art aficionados in Auckland, who will appreciate the extension of the Auckland Art Gallery. So the benefits of this legislation are considerable, Mr Speaker. That's what the good Dr Worth stated. And indeed they might well be, or perhaps they might well have been, had something been done about it at the time. But I don't know what's happened over the last 6 years, Mr Speaker, with regards to the issues pertaining to this bill as far as the Dunedin Octagon is concerned. Perhaps Dr Woodhouse could inform us of that. Never mind the Port Chalmers Bowling Club, the Otago Area Club, or indeed the Auckland Art Gallery. And I have no idea, and I would hazard a guess that I'm not alone, and that many members of this House probably have not followed those issues through in detail. So that being the case, Mr Speaker, and in closing, I reiterate that New Zealand First will support this bill to the Committee of the Whole House, where these matters might be addressed. And because we recognise that it could, the way things are going, be another 6 years before that committee stage comes about, I don't intend to take up any more of the time of the House in delaying that prospect any further. Thank you.